And then all of a sudden, I hear this voice, and he's like, well, you're going to find me here. And I was like, what? And I kind of look at the sunset, and it just looked this huge kind of angelic light, like it made a cross with a head, and it looked like this really beautiful being. But it was the sun, but the way that the mountain and the reflection of the waters and everything, it just looked like this really big angel. And all of a sudden, he's like, I'm Jesus. And I was like, what? Because I kind of removed myself from that language. And he was like, just because you got kicked out of the church doesn't mean we can't have a relationship.
All this and more coming up on this episode of the Truth Seeker Podcast. Really quick, before we get started, if you are blessed by this ministry, if you're blessed by this platform, anything that I bring to the table, I ask you to partner with me via Patreon. Go to patreon.com/truthseeker and you unlock rewards, my entire discography of music, webinars, meditations, weekly hangouts, and so much more. Patreon.com/truthseeker. Go check it out.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the Truth Seeker Podcast, streaming live at truthseeker.com, your source for spiritual and inspirational music, teachings, and media. This show is designed to help you grow in your walk with Christ and advance the kingdom of heaven. And now, your host, Truth Seeker.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Truth Seeker Podcast. I'm your host, Truth Seeker, excited to be with you for this episode. Today, my guest is Manex Ibar. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's actually Manesh Ibar.
Manesh Ibar. Even cooler, man. Manesh.
Yeah,
How's it
the
going,
X
bro?
is
Welcome to
correct.
the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk all things spirituality, nature, which is a big part of it. Like you said, however you find my work or whatever, had something to do with nature. Recently, we've kind of been on the vein of, reintegrating the connection with the mother, if you will, which is coming back, which is much needed, which has been something that's been ignored and suppressed and hushed. And I think her voice is becoming a lot louder for people who weren't open to the idea. It's always been there, so it's not like something new, but it's, her voice is reaching people who she's been hidden from. I'll say that. So it's been a huge part of our journey. So I'm excited to dive down that path with you and talk about the Sphinx Code and your app that you're working on and bring it to the table and changing lives through, man. So just ready to dive deep in with you. For people who don't know who you are, it's your first time here, like just kind of give an overview, who you are, what you do, bring to the table, and we'll just start there.
Sure. So I've been on this spiritual path since I was 16, so back in like the 90s, and to date myself. And it was just for me, just kind of like my spiritual path. And then eventually I turned into a healer, became a healer for over 15 years. I've been doing ceremonies for the last 15 years as well in terms of spiritual and then also plant medicine. I've been guiding a lot of people through like higher states of consciousness and altered states of consciousness, bringing them back through nature's intelligence, which is what I kind of try to call this magic that we have in this realm. And basically, yeah, doing the Sphinx Code and discovering the subconscious, working on all the archetypes that create our reality and how we're plugged into this reality and how to better accept ourselves and then optimize ourselves. So it's been quite a journey. I got hit by lightning twice, drowned in the Pacific Ocean during a vision quest. I've gone up in the mountains for 420 days total, with an excursion of 44 days alone in one time. So I've been busy and doing a lot of my own work, obviously, and then leading others towards their own path.
Wow. Let's go back to 16. How did it start? Those are always, the fun ones to go to, the origin stories, because many of us have been 16 before too and had encounters and things like that. We go back to the birthing thing. What was it at 16 that kind of caught your attention?
It was actually at 14, but I started doing it seriously at 16 just because I was obviously scared or shied away from it. But and I think it is like a time like around 14 to 16 that the call kind of knocks at your door, and whether we take it or ignore it. I was more in the ignoring, but then it kind of came back. So I was in a band. I think we have some connections with that, doing music, and music bringing us into spirituality in a sense. I think it's all because of frequencies, so it makes sense later. But as a teenager, I was in a band, and we were touring, and we drove for like 4 hours, and I was crunched up in the back, and I'm the drummer, so I needed to walk, and I went into the woods, and basically, I don't know what, through a series of fears, I just kind of kept walking through these barriers of fears up to a point of going kind of crazy, thinking the Chainsaw Massacre was going to come in the Connecticut woods. And so I was just like, all right, I don't know what it is, but just I'm letting go. Go ahead, kill me if you need to. And I just popped out of my body and floated above, and started having this very strange experience of multiple consciousness where I could see myself through the body, but also from above. And the one above was melted into a kind of unity consciousness. I could feel the owl, the trees, the worms, the roots, the bats, the radars, like everything. And then looking at my shadow that's still like this, I'm trying to figure out if I died, if I didn't, like what was going on. And eventually my shadow kind of started turning around me, singing me a song, and then jumped back into me. And I came back in, and I was like, what is this? So I went back, played the thing. My bandmates were like, why were you gone for 3 hours? Like, where'd you go? And for me, it was like maybe 20 minutes. So there was a weird time lapse there. Played the concert, and the next day I was like, I gotta go back to the woods. And my guitarist came, and there was a Native American guy that was there with two chairs, and called out and was like, you get over here, and asking me like, why didn't I, go away from the fear? Yeah, I told him like I was just taught, to go through fear, and that there's always something behind. And he was like, well, you're a medicine man, but I'm not your teacher. And so, of course, the guitarist was kind of like, what? You're a medicine man? Like, what is this? And so I got this like funny name, and Mohawk Manny became kind of like a nickname, and they made fun of me. But there was a full moon that night, and I kind of remember that. Just so that I had kind of given up on all spirituality. I thought it was for people who were hopeless, and I went more into the logic and science and all that, studying physics. But here I was having this weird spiritual experience. And so at 16, my aunt, I was in France, and for like 2 weeks, and happened to be with my aunt, who's a little bit more of a hippie. And she mentioned that there was a full moon, and that, oh, we should do some ceremony. And I didn't know what that was. And so she said, well, there's some numbers, you can kind of call them. And I called a guy, and his name is Jackie Bailey. He's no longer with us, but he was one of my teachers from that day. And so I drove across France, went up in the mountains, met this guy who's like a little druid Merlin, blue-eyed, white hair, beard, one arm. And he's just laughing at me, and then drives me up. And then there was teepees, and then there was Archie Fireland deer from North American Lakota tradition. And we were doing a sweat lodge, which was my first experience into an initiation in the shamanic medicine man kind of traditions of the Lakota. And it was mind-blowing for me. So I started seeing spirits and animals in there and all sorts of things, and I was just completely wowed. But I wanted to understand, like, how could heating up rocks and going into a natural sauna evoke so many visions? And so I ended up learning with these two, with Jackie for a good 20 years. Archie left us 2-3 years after I started, even though I started walking on the red road with him. And then life just kind of took over and gave me many, many different teachers and experiences. So that's what started it.
Yeah, man. It's interesting, the fear thing, when you lean into the fear versus running from it. The fear is like this barrier that, tries to keep people out, or it's kind of like the first initiation, right? It's like, what are you going to do at the first sign of fear? Like if we go
Yeah.
back to, many of these different traditions, they had a coming of age ceremony, which was a initiation, and there was things set up that was fearful. There were certain monsters or beings or noises or the bat guy that you got to face in the cave and stuff like that, and to see like who's going to go through with it, or are you going to eat that handful of mushrooms or something, right? Because there are fears that are going to come up, and what does it do? Even in the dream state, it's really amazing. Like when you're chased by a monster or something like that, and you're tormented by this thing your whole childhood or whatever. But the moment you stop and face the fear, or say, hey, why are you chasing me to begin with? Like, I need some clarity. Then it's like, oh, I just needed a friend or something like that, right? But it's this initiation into a deeper conversation, into the next phase. So, I mean, have you seen that as something that's kind of, repeating itself over and over when you feel uncomfortable or feel the fear, but now, like, I know that there's something beautiful waiting just beyond the dragon. There's a beautiful treasure, right, right on the other side of this fear.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it kind of goes back to the myth, and I'm glad you're bringing the dragon and the monsters, because the devil, in a sense, was Pan originally, and Pan held the secrets of the earth, of the feminine, but he was the one that tested whether your heart was pure or not, and the purity was tested through your fear. Were you able to overcome your fear or not? And I think it goes back to like the Shambhala traditions in the dragon tales of the East, where the dragon is the keeper of the sacred, like priestesses in a way, of the jewel, of the
Yeah.
knowledge,
Even in the
and
Bible, right?
dragon. So it's the classic thing. And I think, as you said, the mushrooms, you get a handful and you're like, oh my God, am I really doing this?
I think I ate too many. Oh God. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you see all the monsters in your head. But I think the fear is really the threshold that you need to cross. And it's really interesting because there's kind of like different fears. There's that fear of the mind and the ego that you feel, but you kind of almost get chills where you're supposed to go through that, versus like this real deep instinctual fear of survival if, like, I don't know, an animal comes at you or something. And even then, the survival, you could say, okay, well, I'm fleeing because it's dangerous. And it's really for my survival. But I think there is this initiation into how do you relax that nervous system to overcome that fear and find love, in a sense. And even if the grizzly's showing up, by facing that fear, you transcend, and there is this love and therefore a connection that starts happening. And I think that's really part of the path of liberation. And I've had that in nature. I mean, bears have showed up, and the fear sure comes. It's very natural. But
Yeah.
how do you transmute it so that you can start having this really nice play?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's the initiation, but what you're rewarded with after, it's worth it. You know, the
It is.
it's always worth it. Like to go into the uncomfortable places, or which everybody's not allowed. So that is the initiation. And you could probably just look at so many areas and aspects in your life, whether they're literal or spiritual, where it's happened. I think everybody can, right? If they would, just be honest with themselves. Even the things that, the dreams and visions that were given to them as a child, and there's something that comes in a way where it tells them that they can't have that, and there's a fear. And the moment they try to lean into it, like those scary voices come up. It tells you why you can't have it, and if you lean into it and become clear with it and talk back to it, maybe, you can, find out that you can actually have that thing, and that dream it wasn't supposed to be a nightmare to begin with.
Exactly. No, I mean, I think that what you're saying too is like the communication, like face it and then communicate, like actually engage it. And usually there is a conversation that starts, and that is, I think, part of the real beginning towards understanding what it is. There's a really good book that's called Feeding Your Demons by a Tibetan monk, which is, it talks about that, like where basically all your demons, which is what brings you into your addictions or your negative habits or your torture and your suffering. If you start talking to that demon or that darkness within you, you feed it what it's looking for on top of it, rather than, let's say, the cigarette, you give it love and attention, the habit changes, and that demon becomes like an angel in a way, like he becomes a protector towards the lower realms. And that's how they explain it. And I think it's true. I mean, in my life, it's not like you're chasing fear, because you don't, you're not trying to invite it in all the time. But it shows up. And especially when you're going through the spiritual work and the heavy healing and all that, there's a lot of fear. And I think that's where confidence also is built through practice. And this is why initiation was important, because there was steps to the levels of fears. Like at 14, you got to go through certain fears, which would be different at 50, right? I mean, and at 7, you have fears of the monsters under your bed. At 50, that's kind of over, but you might have fear of separation or your wife leaving you or something like that. Yeah. And you still have to deal with the fear. How do you deal with it? You know, and that's I think what spirituality gives us as tools, is to overcome it, transcend it, and pass through it to get to the treasure, which is usually a deeper bonding, healing, growth of consciousness. There is that invitation. I mean, I think you're right too. Like the fear is like, it is the knock of the calling towards the unknown.
Yeah.
And of course, the unknown is fearful because we don't know it. I mean, it's like walking in a dark room, right? The dark room is kind of scary until you put the light on, which is you get to know what there is, and all of a sudden we don't fear. And hopefully it's a nice place that you discover. But it could also be a cave with a lot of monsters, and still you know what that is, and therefore can still either choose to run or confront it. I think there's different levels for sure.
Yeah. It's giving it attention, awareness, and again being honest with yourself. But again, past the threshold, like what is there? It has something to give you, like the demon thing you're talking about. I started out in the dark arts, just on the negative side, where it was like looking into the satanic and that kind of thing at 14. And I broke through, like I touched them. They're totally real. They're not just, people can see them, people can summon them, like it's legit. And then I almost, lost my mind in my life, doing that stuff early on, and didn't know what I was doing. And a lot of people do, lose their minds in it. And so I definitely have a compassion and an empathy for those people, to, versus the right way and wrong way on how to deal with this stuff. But once I got free from said demons, right? They like the scary ones, I guess, and I ran to the light. I found the light, light of Christ. And that really was my solace, and still is. But I was able to, years later, return and like look at the so-called demons, just to say thank you, because like it's made me the person that I am. And I did get to live and experience that and talk about it, which is like any psychedelic journey. Like you made it out, you did, but did you die? No, I didn't. I made it out. And so I'm thankful, and I can see, something that others can't, if you will, to, not want to kill your demons or rebuke your demons or cast them to hell. They have a purpose. Just like you were saying, like Pan and all of the different beings that have a purpose. And it's not just one thing. It's not just their negative. In our circles, there's ideas of wanting to like convert your demons into angels, kind of thing, as far as like consequence. That's how I look at it. Consequence. Like if there's laws, right, that have to be kept, and if you break the law, there's a consequence that happens, and most of the time it is an entity, an idea that isn't, you know, as forgiving or playful, and it shows up, and a lot of times we call those demons, and people would want to convert that to an angel. And I find it like, hold on, we need that stern talking. Like, you need the fact that when you put your hand over the stove or into the fire, that it is going to burn you. You need to know, like, not to do that. And the lesson is a hard lesson because it hurts. And, a lot of times I identify that with, where we started and, what that initiation was and is for me is just a deeper appreciation for the dark side, for both, because you don't know how beautiful or how marvelous the light is until you've been in the depths of darkness. And it's not that one is good or even one is bad, but being able to see it for what it is and salute it and say thank you, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to judge, right? That's God's is the one that judges, and I think the duality of things is really where we live here, and so they have their place. I always say, the bass in a band or in music, the bass frequency are heavy. They're more impactful, and you could say those are the dark ones versus the flutes and the high ends, which are more angelic in our conception. But like, to actually have a full symphony, you need all the frequencies, and to really make music, you need both. And that's actually what the contrast and the tension that the opposites create is what actually allows for the music to play, or for our life to evolve, in a sense. And so it's how we take these, the angel is great and the demon is great because they bring you different aspects. Obviously, knowing how to engage is the key. And I think you're right also, in terms of, like, there are laws of nature, there's laws in this cosmos, and learning them sometimes with our stubborn mind. And I think there's a lot of lack of initiation, especially in the rites, that you were talking about, where back in the day, every culture had rites of passages for men and women early, like around the 14-year-olds, where we would learn these laws, which would help because you could kind of test them through the fear, through the initiation, and therefore understand that they're real, these spirits are real, and why are you attracting and communicating with that? There's obviously a resonance within you that you need to get acquainted with, and that's part of the taking consciousness of yourself, right, and responsibility for yourself. The people that are always just chasing the light, they're not grounded usually, and there's usually confusion as well. It's illusion versus the losing your mind, but it's like two of the same. And finding that balance is really the key. But it's hard. Facing your diseases, nobody wants to, nobody wants to look at our own shit. But it's like, at the same time, there's a lot of clues to your health there too.
Yeah, there's an overcompensation, for, I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast over the years, and you start finding the memes, the similarities that run through them all, the silver lining. And many of the healers, started out hurting people, and they're trying to overcompensate or trying to right the wrongs that they've done. But even then there's a balance, There's a balance of, like, trying to pay your penance and let me live the rest of my life helping and serving, versus, like, it's you're just doing it because it's who you are and it's what you do now, versus, like, I'm trying to make amends and hopefully I get into heaven kind of thing, because there's that too, definitely from the Christian perspective, from pastors and preachers, like, that's definitely, a lot of their stories. But, just to see the bigger picture and to be thankful for it all. And, it is an initiation, and it's to salute them, not to cast them out, but to lean into them even. I know that's a scary conversation because these things are scary for a reason, but just know that, like, everybody's fear is different. Like, there's people who probably, could walk that same forest and not have any of that fear, like walking with you. Like, one of your friends could have came with you and be like, man, well, you're tripping, dude. Are you okay? Like, it's just you. but we all perceive differently. And I say that, but there was probably some kind of a, initiation that was set up by the dude, like a protection spirit on
Totally.
the outside, which is what Pan, tends to do, to pan out,
Yeah,
the good from the bad, or pan the gold. You know what I'm saying?
exactly.
It's
I
been
mean, he said it was a sacred ground, and so there's a protection field, and that's why he called me the medicine man, because he's like, there's only medicine men that can go through that. Obviously, you're uninitiated, and this could be your first initiation. That's what he said, but he's like, but I'm not your teacher, so I know that, and you have to find it somewhere else, which is kind of interesting when you have such an experience, and then you're like, where do I turn to? And I think this is what's lacking. And nowadays with like your podcast and so much of the consciousness back in the 90s, I mean, it was like crazy. Even when I started and I was in the shamanic path, people were like, what are you doing? Like, what's a shaman? And now everybody wants to be a shaman, which is a whole different thing, which I don't know if you should want to, like the shamanic path is about facing death over and over
yeah.
in a sense, and overcoming that fear so that you know the other side, so that actually you live fully. And the Egyptians and the Tibetans all talk about that, like the death is guaranteed for all of us. And if we understand or learn about it in a way, we can die with grace rather than in fear. And in a way, a lot of the initiations is practicing to die. I mean, even certain meditations is that it's kind of taking us out of the physical and into the spiritual, which is what death is. It's a transformation towards the other side. And so where you're going to go when you die really depends on your consequences, your cause and effects of your actions in your life. Have you been generous or have you been selfish? Have you been giving or have you been taking? And in that, you're going to meet the spirits that will test you accordingly, before either they send you back or they bring you into the celestial, and you get some new schoolings and maybe a nice, beautiful path. And then whether you come back or not, like that's, I guess, dependent upon your level of, giving actions and level of consciousness that you've acquired through this path here now.
Yeah, I find it beautiful now, and I find it multidimensional too, because like the conversation that we're having, and we push it off. Like, when you die, this is gonna happen. Well, if you've gone through a shamanic process, a death and rebirth process. I mean, even in the text and the verbiage of Christianity is to die and be reborn and come through your mother's womb again. How can I be reborn? And it's like, well, first you have to die. And so like in that death process is like this voluntary, okay, I'm ready for judgment. I'm ready for judgment. So we have this idea of like, okay, it's when we give up the ghost and we're no longer in this form, is then the judgments are going to come, and we're going to pass through the veils and our heart is weighed against the feather, if you will. But it's like, hold on, what if this is, because there's a lot of cultures that believe that this is the underworld, like we fell from grace, and we are the fallen angels that we're not being graced, that we're trying to condemn, that is us, and we're being judged, and we're going through these steps and rites of passage and initiations, because we start seeing these things that happen when you die, like that we read about in all the books, like in the now, like the people and the opportunities, like you're going to stand before God and be judged one day. Like that whole thing becomes real when you're like, no, I'm standing before God now, and I'm being judged this day, and I am like giving an account for every idle word you speak when you die. Like, what? Let me die now, and let me give account for my words now, because I am. You're crazy if you think that your words don't carry weight and power, and you don't have to, you're not responsible for how you make people feel and those kind of things. So it's the beauty of like reading about these ceremonies and initiations and what they were preparing to go be judged. And then once we do that, we're like, hold on, like that person that I just met, his name is eerily similar to, the god of the underworld that checks you at the gate or whatever. So this is the initiation that everybody is a part of. That's
Yes,
the biggest thing. It's like you had to go through the process. No, I think like all of us are here going through the initiation together.
for sure.
What would you say to that?
I mean, I think you're right. Like, and there is a lack of initiation where I think a lot of the priests in the ancient days would take that work a little bit more seriously. And there was a time with the power of the church where there is some manipulation that happened where there was more fear uh, to use power, so that basically instead of having our own experiences, we had to give it to the priest for the priest to kind of take over. Um, and that's with every religion, I would say, all spiritual paths, even some gurus, they all somehow fall when they're trying to take the power. As soon as you start giving the direct experiences to the people, and you share the initiation, which I think is what's nice about shamanism. There isn't a school of shamanism. There isn't like, a big institution that's there. It's really, you get initiated into to experiences that bring you into knowledge, whether it's
Hmm.
through plant medicine, through drumming, through dance and trance, and being buried in a cave, going blind for like 4 days, whatever the initiation is. It's giving you experiences to understand deeper parts of yourself that society and culture, and unfortunately the church today, doesn't give us, to experience the spiritual. And then it's much easier to know, like you experienced the dark side, let's say, that they're real, and then all of a sudden be like, okay, I have to watch what I'm doing. You don't condemn them, but you're like, I got to be careful, I'm playing with fire here.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with angels. I mean, you start summoning angels all the time, there's going to be consequences as well to that. And so when you might really need them, you've used up your tickets in a way. I don't think it works exactly that way, but it depends on your relationship if you're completely dependent. And so I think experiencing the spiritual is the most important, and that's what I'm really grateful for the shamanic path, that doesn't really try to have a guru. The teacher is really there to lead you through experiences that usually bring up fear, and he's usually laughing at you. And then that somehow encourages you, or you think he's insane. But when you go through it, there's usually this incredible release of love, right? And I think that's the divine that's bringing us into the courage of facing your fears, which then transcends our negative aspects into something that is stronger, and that's the power of love, and how that does unite us. And then you want to encourage others to kind of do the same because of the benefits it does for yourself,
Hmm.
and it brings you into a bigger heart. And I
Yeah.
think that's the key.
Let's talk a little bit about.
Shamanism too, like what we call space, we open space. You kind of call the four directions, I mean the seven, but there's always the light, and then there's the dark spirits, and you always call them in. And I remember some Hindu woman that was in my ceremony. She freaked out when I called all the dark spirits, because in her religion, you try to do everything but call the dark spirits.
Yeah.
And no, we want all of creation here. Like, we don't want to be selective. That's filtering. Obviously, there's certain rules that we're setting in our ceremony. So there's the intention of why you're doing the ceremony, but we're inviting everybody, because everybody is useful to transform and to heal. You can't just call who you want. I mean, it's not when you're doing like a full ceremony. During your daily practices, you can call your masters, your teachers, and your higher aspects, but I still think you should call your demons and recognize the dark forces that are with you, because they are teachers, just as much, in keeping you in check with,
Yeah.
your ego and your illusions and your power, um, which can obviously corrupt us, right?
Yeah, I mean, just like in school, like I remember having teachers who weren't your favorite teachers, and quite frankly, some of them were mean and maybe didn't want to be there, but they still had something to teach. They had curriculum, and you needed to listen and you needed to learn while you were there. And but then you had teachers that you loved and that were fun and that believed in you and encouraged you. But that even shows you the contrast of what a teacher is. But it is to salute all the teachers, because they're all part of the school, and you have to take those classes.
Yeah, for sure. I remember, and on top of it, the same teacher can play both parts.
Yeah.
And that's quite interesting, because I had this hockey coach, actually. He was super great. He was really encouraging. And then, like, on my final year, when I was like the VP and the captain, he all of a sudden like went dark on me and was pushing me all the way up to actually I quit. And so it was kind of interesting. And I moved to wrestling because the guy like punched me, and I was like, there's a violence and I'm not going to go sue him. And so I was wondering what happened is I ended up being a wrestler and won that. And so I expanded into a new sport rather than kind of lean on what I was good at. And so in the end, I actually thanked him, and I went on a trip with him, to do good up in Jamaica and whatever. That was like part of our high school curriculum.
Nice.
And so it was interesting, like how his actions also pushing me hard as an example, because he knew that he could, backfired on him where I quit. And then he was really pissed because he was like, wait, I lost like one of my best players. But same thing with me. His actions that I rejected then made me learn all sorts of things, which then made me be thankful. And therefore I was able to forgive and even love him and go on this marvelous trip that actually changed or had a huge impact on my life.
Yeah, everything has a reason and purpose, and everything comes full circle, or we make it, you know what I'm saying? We're like,
it does. I mean, I think this, if you go into the Sphinx Code, actually, there's a lot of teachings there, and there's some disruptions. And one of the things is that you see immediately your dark pyramid and then your light pyramid. And we have both, right? And the dark pyramid is where the work is. It's where you have to transmute, your psyche from past lives, from your parents, from your cultural understanding, all this stuff. And it's kind of there. And that creates this kind of false identity, this ego. And then it kind of gives you the path of, okay, like if you do this, if you align to this archetype, you'll go naturally and start transforming the negative patterns to move you into your higher self. And it takes a while, and I love people who are like, oh yeah, I've done that, I'm done. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's a pattern that's going to keep going, and there's going to be more depths and more depth. Of course, you're moving, and so you're accepting more of your light to come in, but it's like you have to make more room, and it's a pretty endless. I mean, it's a deep, let's say, well of things to unpack. Your wounds, like the wounds with your mom, your wounds with your dad, your wounds with your family, the old ancestors and stuff that's still lingering from like, what they say, 20 or 35 generations that is in our genes that we're actually cleaning up. I mean, that's tremendous. And I think the key is not taking everything personally. If you take it personally, you're dead man, right? It triggers you. You go into that aspects rather than the aspect of the person that's suffering, rather than being like, this is another initiation. Here I go again. What were my tools? I need to relax. Mm-hmm. I need to breathe. I need to face this. I need to have a conversation. I need to have the courage, open my heart, be grounded. And then things actually accelerate in your evolution.
Yeah, there's a lot more people doing the work now. I don't know. It's a lot of things, right? You can't just say it's one thing. The internet, but what we all have gone through as a collective recently. There's a lot of things that pressure brings it out, right? Pressure brings out of you what's in you. So you can't pretend that you're not angry and bitter until something comes out and you bleed anger and bitterness. It's in you. So there's these situations that come up that we can identify. Wow, I'm really I'm really not a good person. I really am selfish. I really am these things. I really said that to people, 3 years ago. Wow, people said that to me, and we can identify with it. And many of us who are trying to do well and do good, we like, hold on, I don't want to make anybody feel that way again. I don't want to do that. So, we can lean into it. And so all of these things that are you would call demonic or bad situations, you can make something good out of it. And that's essentially what say we call demons. I don't even really like that word anymore, to be honest with you, but that's what they eat is the bad stuff, and they need it. It has to go somewhere. Your angels don't want it. They're not going to take that. It's too dense. It's not in their diet. But something you can carry it, you get rid of it, give it to somebody else. Many people are cool with that, would like give it to another person and they're carrying your crap, versus the beings that exist, that most of them are through nature, if not all of them, on this plane of existence, where they will gladly take it. And it is their nourishment. And if you feed them what they eat, you give it to them, they reward you, and they take that burden off of you that is heavy. You know what I'm saying? It's because you're trying to carry something that you weren't created to carry. But you don't need to give it to beings or spirits that aren't created to carry that either. And I think that's a huge disconnect for many of us until we learn. And it is through an initiation for many. Mine was taken deeper through ayahuasca recently, of going through the night terrors, if you will, and seeing what they do, and the death experiences. And so there's even a whole deeper appreciation there, like not just spiritual but in the physical.
Completely. I mean, I think disease and even divorce today end up being initiations to awaken us, or to challenge us, to bring us through the fear. I mean, disease, terminal disease is death knocking, and that wakes people up in terms of opening up to all the gratitude that they have, for what life has given them, all the love that there is. They start recognizing it. And then also to challenge them in terms of their lifestyle. Is their lifestyle actually correct? Is it in their alignment? Is it in their best interest? Is it actually giving themselves the sustenance of the correct nourishment? Yeah, like you make billions of dollars, but what are you doing with that? And what is it doing to you? And that can be not just for money. It can be just doing the wrong job, just because of circumstances where everybody thought, you should be a singer, but actually, well, yeah, you can sing. And then you find out that like actually you're more of a ceremonial master, and singing is part of that. And yet there's a whole other role of summoning, spirits and leading people and protecting people so that they can have their transformation experiences. I mean, there's so many different jobs, let's say, in the spiritual path in terms of our purposes. And finding that alignment is so key. It goes back to the old saying, know your thyself, right? And then wisdom follows. And that's really true. And I think each of us has a unique wisdom that we need to get. And that's why we each have our own spiritual path that's unique, and some we go into the light and then we have to deal with the dark, and some we go into the dark and then we find the light, and then some, they're just in the middle ground. They don't even know any of this exists. They almost like are oblivious to it until something knocks them off their kind of golden ticket. And then all of a sudden they have to go through and do that work. So I think no matter what, at one point or another, we all get called to wake up into this work, that, this plane is definitely a spiritual plane. Matter resonates through the spiritual by the energetics and the subconscious, and we have to deal with these archetypes. And as you said, like, thank God, really, for what's happened, whether it's the solar flares, whether it's COVID, whether it's the internet, whether it's just the time that we are all coming in because we want to finally wake up and live a more harmonious life on this little jewel of a place that does provide incredible experiences, for us. So
yeah, those incredible experiences. Let's talk a little bit about what you mentioned, being struck by lightning twice. Can you give a little bit more info on that experience, those experiences?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I wonder if it's also always somewhat connected, where there's like something that you're going through. I was going through a divorce with the mother of the twins back in 2011, and I was trying to contemplate whether it was like some postpartum thing, or whether she really fell in love with this other guy, or should I really fight for our unity. And I decided to go take 3 months to work with the shaman in Hawaii. I'd never been to Hawaii, even though when I was a kid, I was like running around airplanes just screaming Hawaii as a French kid. And my dad was like, no, no, it's plain. And I was like, no, no, bring me to Hawaii. So finally, and it's interesting because it's the age of 33, which is this famous age, even though I wasn't thinking about it. I go to Hawaii, and then the first day, so I was meant to be there for about minimum 3 weeks, all the way up to 3 months. We had to like kind of plan the different ceremonies and initiations. First day I get there, it's a very open space. It's very sacred land. There's all the volcano kind of rocks coming in, and it's very, open, huge, kind of big tents set up, very open, sustainable living, which I love. So she goes to bed around 10 or whatever and says welcome, and I go out, and I'm still a little bit jet lagged and kind of enjoying the night stars, which are beautiful in Kauai, which is a beautiful like island. And yet there's these low clouds, and they're like drizzling, little rain, and like it doesn't bother you. And I was like, man, Hawaii is really a different place. And all of a sudden, out of a rock comes this shooting light beam. And I remember it was like pure red, and it hit me right in my third eye, and it ejected me back. I was sitting, and I'm like now on the floor up, and then a blue beam of light came from the sky and hit me again in the head, up to the point where I had that kind of instinctual reaction to just run back under my bed and just kind of hide. And you're shaken more from the shock, I think, but I was also like very electric, that's for sure. And then my head was just in this dimension of getting so many downloads. So the lightning started talking to me and telling me that if I had been hit at the same time, I would have been eliminated, but that wasn't the point. Here I was initiated, but that there's different colors, and those two colors have certain meanings, and then there's other colors in the lightning, and welcome to the lightning family. And they told me and showed me a lot of different things that I would be doing in the future, which is starting to happen now, which is almost 10 years later. And so, yeah, it was a huge initiation and a shock, but super fascinating. And I'm still, I think, coming to bringing the fruits of that initiation.
Yeah, no, like I ask, and it stands out because I mean, I don't know if I was struck by lightning. I know it was like struck right next to me and my cousin when we were younger. We were walking home from like vacation Bible school, and we were shooting basketball and stuff, and we were walking home, and then all of a sudden, I mean, clouds overhead, but all of a sudden just a loud boom, and we're in the ditch. I mean, that's it, like a loud boom, and I guess a bright light, and then we're on the ground, getting up like, oh my God, what was this? Like, what the fuck, man? Like freaking out. And I think I was like 12 or something, 11 or 12. But, had that experience. Now I'm looking back on, hold on, what happened? Were we abducted by aliens? Did we get hit by the lightning? Like, both of us get up off the ground after this huge, like, loud boom, freaking out. And you just look back like, hold on, it was some kind of impartation. Like, what happened, And, but I say just now.
Like, memory, right? Like because actually I think it was in 2019, and I've obviously told this story, but still, like, you're kind of like, did that really fucking happen? And like, your mind is trying to be like, yeah, I mean, that was crazy, but it did, like, something happened. Was it like, was it not, was it this? And funny enough, you kind of like are trying to recall the past, which obviously is in your brain somewhere, and really bring it back up. And I think this is where the witness is so fascinating. That at that moment, that shaman happened to call, and she hadn't called me in like 8 years. And she just called, and I see her number on the phone. And I'm like, this is so funny. And I pick up and we chit chat for a second. She's like, yeah, I don't know. I felt like I needed to call you. And I was like, well, it's really weird. I was contemplating whether I really got hit by lightning or not. And she's like, oh yeah, you got hit by lightning twice, you know? And I was like, okay, cool. It just it just re-solidifies. And I'm like, can you retell your version of it, you know, and get that other perspective to get that. And you're right, the boom effect, the loudness, it's unparalleled. It like my ears were ringing for I think 36 hours, like for
Wow.
almost 2 days. And but you almost get used to it, where it's almost like it knocks you into this other conscious awareness. And so you kind of get back up and everything's normal, but everything's not, because you still, it's like there's this weird gap of what happened and how fast it was, and yet how normal you go back to reality. Yet what happened? And it's this tremendous speed, you know, of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why your mind kind of bugs. It was like, what happened? Did we get hit? Did we not? Like, I remember actually one point in Canada around 12 as well. I had we were on a canoeing trip with some friends and older friends as well. But yeah, there's the lightning that came and hit right next to us, but it hit the tree and it hit the root, so we saw the root. But it also bounces, you know, and so we saw the lightning bounce, and it kind of came right in front of me, and I heard that kind of sound right after the boom. And yeah, I mean, so lightning is definitely chasing around.
Yeah.
And
Dude,
it's
yeah, we were, it was a year ago. We were having a kayaking experience on the river, and it's like a, shoot, I think it was like a 5 hour trip. And so we're like 2 hours into it, and then overcast, and it's starting to rain heavy, and then the lightning comes. And so I'm like, and everybody's trying to paddle faster and like leaving. I'm like, you can't, what's panicking gonna do? So I was kind of happy because they got away from me. I was like, let me just lean into it, because I've been scared my whole life of lightning. You know what I'm saying? And like, it can kill you. Like and now it's popping all around me as I'm on this kayaking, and I was scared, but it was like, this is awesome, because I'm in awe and I'm in wonder that I'm getting to behold this, and I'm trying to be present and saying, I know you can kill me instantly, anytime, but you're going to allow me to see. And I just started being able to see, what the lightning was showing me. And it was an initiation, and that I got to see. And that was recent, and just to gaze and to behold when it comes to nature, and just to watch it, and then to wonder, because you're told everything is one way. You're told that lightning is a natural phenomenon that happens this way, and it's because of this, and it can do this, and you should be afraid of it. And so there's the fear, and then there's beyond the threshold. Hold on, like, don't let fear overwhelm you. Let awe and wonder overwhelm you, and then see what happens. And it was beautiful. So for you, that relationship with nature, and just relationship with consciousness and all things, there's a big thing just to gaze at it, and just to wonder, and to remove the preconceived notion that somebody told you what it is, and it has no meaning, or the meaning is evil, or whatever the case is. In the moment you take that away and say, what is that? Are you really, what is this? And then you're like, oh, you care? You care that I am a butterfly? You care that I am a tree? You care? That you think I can read your thoughts, or I can read your energy, and I'm not what they told you I am, kind of thing. I feel like that's an initiation into a side that they're able to show you, that nobody else gets to see. It's like a marriage. It's like an intimacy, if you will, that not everybody is allowed into until you give it the attention that it deserves, if you will. Can you speak to that when it comes to nature, or beholding, or going deeper into what a thing really is or what it really is to you?
Completely. I mean, I think that's actually the most important aspect is creating relationship, and that takes time.
Yeah.
And nature, it's different than us having a conversation, having common language, and it requires us to be quiet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is very different. And so gazing, as you said, like the vision quest, and this is one of the things that I do lead, and I lead it because I went through it so much. I mean, I went through the Lakota really harsh, 4 days, 4 nights, no sleep, no water, no nothing. And that's awesome on one level. But then I was taught, I'd say, a more feminine way rather than the warrior way, where you do take a tent and you can even take food if you want. But obviously, then there's bears and animals that you have to deal with because they're going to go and come for the cheap food and the easy food. So, anyways, the practice is, it's not about the discomforts, it's about creating that relationship with different things. Like sitting with a rock for 4 days straight, you're gonna have a conversation, and the rock is going to speak to you because you're human, and therefore you can. It's not because you're an evolved being. It's really because you're spending the time. It's the same thing, with animals. As you kind of come into their territory, if you stay there for a while, they're going to show up, and they're going to want to know, like, what are you doing? And there is this relationship that needs to be built with the natural elements, you know, basic fire, air, water, and earth, but spirit. But with the trees, with the rock, with the stream of the river,
Mm-hmm.
with the mountain, with the beach, with these different environments that have a different way of, and their whole ecosystem is different. They have a different way of bringing us into a different frequency, a different consciousness, a different mood. And for you, it might be the beach. For me, it's maybe the mountain. For like somebody else, it's the forest. You have to kind of go find your environment and then really dip in and stay there. Like, listen to the environment, wonder into the environment, ask questions into the environment, especially when fear comes up. And that's where the most magical things have happened to me, where some of it is unexplainable or unfathomable. You see beings from UFOs, fairies, yetis, like, I mean, all these mythical creatures that every single culture has a myth for, which either they had cell phones before and they were all like telling bedtime stories to their kids, and sharing it,
Yeah.
or the beings are there. And because they were in a time where life was slower, they have more time to, in a way, stretch
Mm-hmm.
the present so that the magical can start appearing. And you see that, like with people that I lead, the more they come, the more nature gives to them. The more they go into the hero, like, I just want to do it because I'm done, and they're counting their time. They're not building a relationship. Up to the point where I remember meeting this guy, I think his name was Thunder Bear, and he had spent 25 years just meditating with the waves in his little beach in California, up to the point where he learned to split the ocean, which sounds pretty miraculous, but and he's like, you want to come and see? And it was fascinating because immediately when he walked onto the beach, the wave pattern started changing. And immediately he was playing with them, and he was like, oh, hi. He had his whole language, which was mysterious to me, and I wouldn't probably do the same as him. um he had found his language with the ocean, and you could see it, and it was evident. And then when he really went in and asked, to split, the waves split. Like, I mean, they came, and there was like this kind of split where he went, which is legendary, but there it was. And so I think each of us have a certain connection with one element more than others. And actually knowing which one is your weak one is probably just the same conversation that we were talking about before. Like, go learn why that one is your weak one, and why is this one your strong one, and find the balance of creating a relationship with both. it brings you into wonder. It brings you into the magic. It brings you into this. I call it nature's intelligence, because it is awesome. Like you're in awe sometimes. And what happens when you're waiting, sitting, gazing, and open is mind blowing. It really is. And nature is so full of this splendor and wonder and conversation. They're dying. It's like everybody, the trees, the flowers, everybody, the stones, they're dying for us to recommunicate.
Yeah.
And to give us these secrets. So
Yeah, my main book, if you will, of like context is the Bible, right? I know it's a very encoded book, and like, it's shown to me there, like the levels of initiations there, like it's telling that story, right? And it's a perfect example of consciousness of like, because that book means different things to different people. So, the moment you bring that up or whatever, this conversation is over. The Bible is a book of control. You're like, oh, the Bible is a beautiful story that contains all stories, and it's the greatest story ever told. Why? Because it's every story. It's this map of tarot, these personifications, if you will, that's all in there. So that's the way I see it. And when I'm ready, they reveal themselves to me through these stories, and it's usually by the names, because and it's so mirrored in what we're talking about with nature, because quite frankly, the Bible is a book of nature, right? If we're talking about universal law and the oldest commandments, it's going to be, it's not a commandment a dude made. That's not it. It's the commandments that were here, and if you get in sync and in line with them, they'll come to bless you, and you want to give back. And how do we do that? But it's hidden. There's a deepener that happens there. It's hidden behind a veil, and maybe 2 or 3 veils, right? And shown to you when you need it. And it's to get the bad stuff out of you first, to show it before they show you how you can control water or something, right?
exactly.
So, like you mentioned, Pan in the forest and stuff, and it's so funny that's one that we dove deep into, me and my wife, reading the scriptures and seeing Pan in the scriptures, like as a disciple. Like it's showed up as a dude named Silas. And it's like, hold on, what is Silas? Because his name shows up later. He has several names, and it's when the names change, but they call him Sylvanus later. And I'm like, hold on, let me look up Sylvanus. Let me look up the Greek meaning of Sylvanus. Well, it means Silas. And who is Silas or Sylvanus? Well, he was a Greek god of the forest, and he was a protector of the forest. And he was Roman, I'm sorry. But in Greek, he was called Pan. And so every tradition, in every culture, he has a different name, and then there's a personification and what he does and protects and works with you, and all of this stuff. And I'm like, then as I'm reading, that's just in his name, but then I'll go deeper into his story and see what he's like. Anytime his name is brought up, it's something to do with nature and the forest and doing ritual outside and connecting. And it's like, wow, I'm taken deeper into this story that the entire, everybody's reading. But how many people read this and like the nature spirits reach out to you through this text that, quite frankly, they tell you it can't. Like it's not possible, sir. That's not what it's talking about. Well, you don't know what these names mean until you're initiated, and they say, hey, look this name up. Yeah. Or look this word up, and your just mind is blown. So when it comes to nature, and you mentioned Pan right at the beginning, it's you see them when they want you to see them. They let you see them. Like I teach people how to see them, right? But you can't see them unless they let you. You can read the books and go through the process. No, but it's attuning yourself to, first of all, it's an initiation that you want to say hello, that you want to do it. But the want is like, what is the action on top of that? Are you going to go sit out there? Are you going to gaze at it until it morphs and becomes something else? Because one of the hugest things in the Bible talks about the kingdom. the kingdom of heaven, and everybody is waiting for it, but it's saying it's already here. It's coming, but it already is here. It says that which was is also coming, but now is. So it's forever. But it says it's an invisible kingdom that we can't see until you can. Until you can see it. Until you can, like your story, see auras. Like, something's happening. Like, is my eyes going bad?
Exactly.
Because something's going on. Like, there's something on your shoulder, sir. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're able to see and they communicate with you. But it's this beautiful song and dance that we're all occupying these dimensions and realms at the same time with all beings and spirits. We just don't care, or our eyes are calloused until they're not. And it is nature. Is the biggest part of it. It is going out and sitting in the many different paths or modalities that the shamans have from every tradition to they know that it's repeatable. There's a repeatability. So I'm thinking, about what you're talking about, what you're bringing to the table, and even with your app and the Sphinx Code. It's like, if you're like me and most healers, you're just recreating your journey on how you got there, and know that you can take people through a similar experience to produce a result, because the system works if you work it, kind of thing, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying, and this is true, the Bible is more than just a book. It's a code. And there's many layers to understanding or deciphering the code, which is by the initiation, which takes, some people very fast, some people several lives to go back and do that and learn it and then understand it. And the Bible has tremendous amounts of information on so many different layers about this realm, about how it functions, right? And the scientists are very quick to deny it and try to kill it on some levels, but it's for their own benefit, right? And in a way, science at the same time almost says the exact same thing. It's like, the Bible starts that way, like, from nothing came everything. Well, the Big Bang, from nothing, the Big Bang hit. It's like the exact same story to a certain degree. And I think science will eventually end up decoding the fact that the Bible is a quantum book. And so our minds can understand logic through either numbers or through stories, through words. And so the Bible, the most common is obviously through stories. And so they do. And I think what brings the two together is music. Music is mathematics with storytelling, so that you can actually, through frequency, get the code in your body while you're telling a story of what the frequency is that you're tuned into, which is the power of music. But yeah, the code, and just like the Sphinx Code, there's a code to your psyche, and I think probably we could go and find it. The Golden Chariot, for example, is part of the tarot's main kind of, well, it's one of the archetypes. Well, Jesus is the symbol of the Golden Chariot that has opened the realms of heaven in this moment now through his illumination by vehicling his higher potential, right? So the Chariot's either you're going to go to war and you're just fighting everything, or you go and you move the two horses in a sense together, where the spiritual and the material come together, which then starts moving your frequency. You have to go into vulnerability so you can take off all your armors and not be afraid of dying, because you are the vehicle of a divine. Well, when you really embody that, which might be a rebirth in itself, you start carrying the celestial realms within you and have, in a way, or you might become and begin to open up that realm here, which of course will give you an aura that's bigger, will give you beautiful words, because you're starting to see a different frequency within the same realm that others might be dealing with demons, and they're all there. in the same space, right? So, no, I mean, I think the Bible, unfortunately, there's a lot of translations to the Bible, which that's where the human kind of comes in there. But the Bible in itself is a tremendous code, and learning to decipher it is the key. And then, the fact is you can read it yourself. And so the more you read it, it's kind of like the relationship with nature. The more you hang out with a tree, the more it's going to reveal itself. It's going to reveal its code. It's going to reveal its truth. It's going to start opening up to the magic, to the mystery. The mystery is what we're all kind of seeking somewhere, and having the right tools. And the Bible is a great one. I mean, even the Quran says the Bible's true, and then it wrote another book. But that's like the first thing. It's like the Bible's true, Jesus existed, and it was real. Okay, so thank you. And then it expanded upon it. And every prophet, every single one, from Jesus, Rumi, Buddha, Moses, all of them, you go through, what did they do? They went and spent time in nature, and they profoundly meditated in a way, contemplated, and entered into a relationship with themselves, being confronted by hunger, by craziness, by, whatever, the suffering, and then they alchemized themselves into a higher state of frequency, which then brought them their wisdom that they could then teach, and their powers of healing, of being creative. I mean, Jesus was an incredible creator and rebel at the same time. I mean, he didn't want to eat on the floor. He made chairs and tables higher, like very practical. And I think there is an aspect of when you raise your frequencies and you decode things become understandable because they're more practical, and yet they empower you so that you can really become, I think, have more joy of being alive without creating suffering. I mean, I think when I've spent so much time in nature, because that's where I've found the deepest teachings, is by opening myself up more and more to creating the relationships with nature, which gave me so much information, not only about my own psyche, as you said, but also about different processes and the laws of nature. And from there, you start getting, I mean, you get into the wisdom, you get into the wonder, you get into the magic, you get into these other things. And when you talk about it with somebody who might be riding the subway every day and never contemplated any of this, you sound crazy, right? But actually, like I'm profoundly in the knowledge that what I experience is unique, because most people just don't do it. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't. They could, and it's open to them. And unfortunately, we're not quite there. But yeah, I mean, systems and teachings and the codes of life, they're all there for us in however we want to experience them. It's funny because I was kicked out in a way of the Catholic Church at 7 because I kept laughing at the priest, because those stories made no sense to me. And instead of just kind of coming and explaining, because I was really interested, he kind of just kicked me out because it was uncomfortable for him, which is too bad. And so I shut the door on that. And weirdly, through the shamanic, I remember being in Lake Titicaca in Peru, and rather than the ayahuasca or even the San Pedro and the Huachuma experiences that I did with the plant medicines, which were beautiful and they taught me a lot, it was walking on Lake Titicaca and going on this little island and walking at night, and finding myself at the edge of the island. And then all of a sudden I hear this voice, and he's like, well, you're going to find me here. And I was like, what? And I kind of look at the sunset, and it just looked this huge kind of angelic light, like it made a cross with a head, and it looked like this really beautiful being. But it was the sun, but the way that the mountain and the reflection of the waters and everything, it just looked like this really big angel. And I actually started captivating it, and there was all this multicolored auras that were coming through the video, and I was kind of like, wow, what is going on? And all of a sudden he's like, I'm Jesus. And I was like, what? Because I kind of removed myself from that language. And he was like, just because you got kicked out of the church doesn't mean we can't have a relationship. Like, I exist like others, and I love you. And I just like, I kind of like fell into these tears and this opening. And for a good 45 minutes, we hung out, and he showed me and talked and did this whole thing. And it was just pure light, pure beauty, pure humor as well. And there was this real deep reconnection, which is kind of funny because it's Peru, and I wouldn't have thought that that's where you'd go to find that experience, but that's just where it found me. And ever since, like, it's been completely in my heart, and we continue that relationship up to the point of reading different scriptures from the Bible, and it's been fascinating to start decoding things. And I'm glad you went into that aspect of nature, because then, of course, the interpretations, and when you have somebody in power that's in the church and he's the cardinal and and he says this, then you're meant to like take it. And yet when you read it and you have a different experience, and he says, no, that's heresy. I don't know, like, it's in the book, it's the same words, I'm reading it differently, like, is that more correct or not? Like, and this is where I think there's some of the power issues that come up. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people have turned away from reading the scriptures, and they're essential. Like, we can start having conversations through the scriptures. There's a lot of morals in the scriptures that save us time because they teach us the laws. And instead of experimenting, like, it's like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can read the stories and be like, right, I get it. Like, noted. I'm not going to have to go through that. I can forgive my enemy, like, I can touch upon, there's just so much wealth of information. Yeah. What was fascinating for me, though, was getting into some of the Sumerian tablets, which, have some of the base, and the whole Bible actually has most of those stories. But the Sumerian tablets go back, obviously, as some of the ancient texts. And the fact that there is a resonance and that there is the same stories in the Bible shows that it's directly related to our past in terms of the divine laws. And what I think is that it even speaks a frequency to awaken our genes, and so when you really know how to go into the scriptures and read them, your frequency changes. And you start elevating because your frequency changes, which is unbelievable. There's very few books that can do that.
Yeah. Being able to see, because we're taught to demonize, the things that are different, or we're taught in religion to only see the things that make us different, and versus seeing how it's the same or it fits, it's because there would be real easy, just even the example of Silas and Sylvanus, and it's like, that's not who that is. Well, there's no backstory on this guy. You don't know who that is. Like, the backstory was made up, just so you know. But if you look up the backstory that their characters revealed through their name, if you do that, then you get something. So you're taking the stance to defend why this person you're reading about is a person and not the god of the forest kind of thing, First, like, hey, it might be. Like, he's mentioned anytime in forest, or, and so if we do that with, all of the text, we'll see that they gel, that they really do. And you have to defend yourself of why they don't. You have to go through, because you're holding on to this thing that you've been told is unique and is separate. And because you're a separatist, it was what a Pharisee is. It's one who's, and there's a time and place for that, really. But to think that it's unique just unto you, and why it's different. But when you can look at what makes us the same, man, that is an initiation in of itself. Because it's like, hey, we have more in common with these people and with these religions or whatever that somebody didn't want us to know about. And there are connections. Now I can't help but see the connections, and then we get accused of making connections that aren't there. But I can see the connections of why you said the cardinal in a Catholic cardinals are telling you this, and he's wearing a red robe, and then there's this beautiful cardinals outside flying and nested in the trees. Why are they called cardinal? Who came first?
Yeah.
Who came first? Kind of thing. And it's like just to see the connection and the birds and all of the Catholic art. And then you go to Sumerian and it was the bird god. And then you go to all of them and there's bird. Go to all of the traditions and you'll eventually see bird gods and dragon gods and animals. And so it's like, just because they didn't show you the iconography of that doesn't mean that you can't dig deeper and see the connection, because it's there. And once you're able to see that, use the word initiation, just because it's a deepener into a conversation that you were locked out of.
Yeah.
You were locked out of it until you're like, hey, I'm not going to judge the serpent, because it's used as wisdom, and the serpents help people. And, I looked like a serpent before I came here in this form. If I go to my most primitive imagery of what humans looked like before they went into the egg, we looked like little serpents, and here we are demonized. I'm just saying, like, hold on, what makes us the same? And I find that in there's again that conversation that's waiting to be had.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're touching upon a point that I love, which is that through the diversity we have so much beauty, yet that diversity actually shows us that we're very common. And kind of like the Chinese, like you say, or in Asia, you see all the T-shirts. It's like same but different, and it's what it is. It's like we are the same, and so our uniqueness and our diversity makes us extraordinary, because it's taking the same roots and actually expanding them into the creative purpose of the divine that allows us to express each of these frequencies in so many different patterns and to different ways, almost like creating a song. You're playing with very similar instruments and yet it sounds different. Why? And that is where spirit kind of comes in. Our uniqueness shines through. And I think that's essential, not becoming a McDonald's world where everybody's eating the same, talking the same, saying the same. Because eventually, I mean, it might go there, but eventually it'll just re-split back up into the creativity. I mean, like this whole idea of singularity, where we're all going to come to one. Well, yeah, but we are that. So the fact that we split up, again, is to go into the individual, but see it as a glory rather than being scared of it, seeing it as, wow, it's the same thing, but manifesting itself so differently than me. How amazing. Let me try to understand. Let me try to go deeper. And that's where we can find that bridge to connect. And as soon as we connect, we can understand each other. And then we can start agreeing to even disagree. But, by taking two different sides. But it's okay. It's kind of like, I like pink, you like blue. Great. Well, what, should I convert you to like pink? Why? Like you stick with blue and pink. And now what can we do with that?
Yeah.
Oh, look, purple. Amazing. Let's
Yeah.
go make some purple together.
Yeah, so good.
Rather than fight about mine's better than yours. And I think that's, there's different levels of conscious awareness, which we see also within our energy centers. And some of us are in different places. And I think when you're very evolved, it's your duty to kind of come down to somebody who hasn't had some of the experiences to be, let's say, lucky or initiated or opened to those higher frequencies in consciousness. And so we want to bring our fellow man up, but you have to go down to a certain degree to meet them where they are. And judging them as, oh, you're down there. It's like, well, you were there at one point, and who brought you up? So why aren't you serving the favor?
Yeah.
And this is the kind of stories that I think a lot of sacred texts teach us. And of course, like Lao Tzu or the Buddha, they use a lot of animals and postures of animals and ways of animals to teach us different aspects of within ourselves, which actually, if you think about our DNA, we do have all the animals, all the creatures, all the history within us. So it's for sure at one point or another, different parts of us activate and showcase all of nature within us. There's a really cool philosopher that I think we missed. Spinoza was at the time of Descartes, and Descartes said, we are because we think, which actually ended up bringing us into this whole mental aspects and separated us from the more feminine earth tone, the magnetic aspects. And Spinoza was saying, no, like, look, guys, like nature is divine because there's everything there and it's obviously created by the creators. Therefore, if nature is divine and we come from nature, we are nature, well, then we're divine. And therefore, we are, right? And so somehow that was too forward thinking at the time, or it was political powers, whatever it was. Descartes kind of came through, and we've followed that, philosophy for so long. And I think now the time is more that we're going to go back to Spinoza and be like, no, we're nature. We need to be reconnected to nature, up to the point where I think the climate crisis is more of a philosophical crisis, if not a spiritual crisis, within the fact that we've lost our connection to our own nature. What are we as humans? What is our place here in this nature? And how can we expand through this incarnation to become these golden chariots, as these prophets have shown us that we can?
It's so good.
I went much deeper into the scenes kind of philosophies and teachings within the Christian paths, I guess, which I guess Jesus was a part of, and Mary, and it's super fascinating how shamanic it is, actually. It's very much the same, like as you were saying, and I love that, like seeing the Lakotas, but then going to the Shipibas in Peru, but then the Mongolians, and then the Tibetans, and then the Hindus, and you start seeing, there's like same patterns, same initiations, same different, like, okay, we all have to go through a death ritual. We all have to kind of get blind so that we can see. We all have to rebirth ourselves.
That's what happened to Paul and all those guys. And then, like, it's so wild because, like, that happened to Paul, and I got this crazy teaching I put out just because I was able to see it. But, like, that happened to Paul with Christ, right? And he was an evil dude, supposedly. He was hurting people, using his information, knowledge, and magic to harm people. And he gets blinded by Christ and has this encounter. And then he ends up using the same wisdom, but to help. And then he ends up initiating people who are on this magi path. Like 4 chapters later, he runs into a shaman, if you will, a magician, who's like, oh, you want to do what I do? And you're the biggest dude let me show you what magic really is. Let me show you what power really is. And he makes the dude blind. Like, he's like, let me initiate you into this place of blindness. And he gives it a time and everything. It's a spirit that, like, Paul was working with the same dark spirits, like, but for good. And it's like, it gives you the names of the spirits if you just look up the Greek and Hebrew words used there. And it goes back to Egypt. And it goes back to every culture, because these spirits, they're here. They have a purpose, in the darkness has a purpose. And you're locked out of it until you're initiated. I was initiated into, I'm throwing that word around a lot, but that's what it is. 'Cause it is. So the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, right? People talk highly of it and stuff in the Gnostic circles and stuff that we run in. And I try to read it, and I was like, I can't really get into it. But it wasn't until, an ayahuasca ceremony, then the next night, like, the mother is revealed so much in that, the feminine aspect. And I'm like, well, let me go try to read that again. And everything that was like downloaded to me and shared with me in the ayahuasca was like in the first lines of the Gospel of Mary. That's been there the whole time.
It's amazing.
I was just locked out. I couldn't see it until I had a experience that was like, wow, now it makes sense. And so many other books and text and poetry, if you will, all poetry that doesn't mean anything to you until you're going through an experience that you're able to give it context in your life. And it's such beauty in that, and being able to salute and appreciate the differences, appreciate the other cultures and the things that you're able to see that connect these cultures, that connects, Sumerian and Christian or Kabbalist or mystic or shaman. You're able to see that. But then you get there and you honor them and you see that, but they don't. It's not necessarily that they're going to return the favor and see it in you, and then so how do you still hold respect for that tradition when you see the ugly parts of the tradition or the person, you know what I'm saying, and not judge the whole or whatever because of, being able to see it and still salute it and appreciate it. That's, I guess, how we started this, with the good and the bad and seeing it all, how it all comes together to create the whole,
Exactly. No, and I mean, I think the duality is beautiful, and it's like it's kind of like the beauty of gray. There's that band, I forget who they were called, but they had that song, The Beauty of Gray. Learn to love the beauty of gray, because gray is blending the black and the white, and it has all the depths of both, right? And we want to be black or white, and it's like, well, actually, the gray has so much of both, and this is where we get to play with all the colors, and the playfulness of the duality is where we can find enchantment, and that enchantment of expressing the moments of how you live that ceremony, how you live that a story, and expressing it through your own words is part of our own, each of us individually, our gifts that we can give to each other, so that who knows, maybe it's 5 years down the road, like that touches some kid or some other adult, and because they're going through that moment, and it's the key that they were looking for that unblocks them to become a better person, and to help them through their trouble. But yeah, I mean, it's I think all the scriptures, all the different texts, all the different religions, all the different spiritualities, if you really go deep into one thing and you just use it and keep going deeper and deeper, you're going to have all the truths that are going to be unveiled. And then from there, you can communicate with the people that might have read a different book, but they've got to the same place. The importance is, how do you communicate, rather than my book's better than yours? It's like, no, it got us to the same place. Isn't that amazing? Now we could switch almost and then dissect it. And I think that's where we're at right now. It's like, it's instead of shoving each other into these sectors, we're trying to see the whole pie and being like, hey, that's awesome. We got an amazing pie here. Like, let's enjoy it all together and keep being that, so I'll keep being this. And so that the pie gets real.
Yeah, the scriptures like give you tutorials on how to do that, but it's so funny because I've read these for years, these stories and these encounters, but I couldn't see them, and I wonder why other people can, and it's plain though. Like, now I go back and read, I'm like, what the hell? Why couldn't I? Like, we read stuff, and because of the cognitive dissonance and the protection of that garden, if you will, it's protected so good that you can read it and you interpret the opposite. Because you're like, you can't be a partaker of this yet. You're not trained. You had to go through, it's school. You can't just start out and go from 3rd grade to 12th. There's other things you have to learn. Like, you have to go through these other classes that you have to learn to really appreciate and see it. But it's so weird of like the brain, the mind, the body cannot even interpret. It's right there. Like, it actually tells you everything that we're saying, like, is in the scriptures, like, plainly. It's not even encoded. I'm talking about to go visit other temples and partake with them, but don't let nobody see you. Like, this is a Christians read this every day, but they're, in their mind, it's a cognitive dissonance, and it could never say that, so it doesn't. It is so freaking mind blowing how consciousness works with the things in front of you, but you get what you get when you need it. You know, when it's time, you read it and you're like, damn, it was always there. You know,
Yeah.
of like showing up speaking, you know, Chinese to, you know, somebody in America who doesn't speak that language. You're speaking in tongues. You're a madman. They have no way to, you know, translate this until you're able to put it into their language and share it and find out that we're all speaking the same thing after all. Something happened when they changed the wording and changed the language on us.
They did. I mean, I think this is where like our DNA, you know, is a code as well. And I think that we all share that with all living beings, that there is this kind of DNA, there is this code that brings us together. And if language could be the language of the code, of the soul, of the genes, you know, it would be so much easier, because then we can go to a much deeper philosophical level rather than, I remember I had a company and we had this argument about the word preservation. We're trying to help indigenous people like learn media so that they could actually document their ancestors and their elders that are dying, you know, and like each elder is dying with a library inside of them.
Yeah.
So we were trying to teach them. And we got into this huge argument about the word preservation. And I was like, who cares about preservation? Like, let's move on. Like, just put it or just change the word. And no, it became like this massive fight, because preservation in one language meant like, it's like a condom. It prevents life, you know, to a certain degree. It's like it freezes it. Versus in another English, it means preserving so that it can live. And I was like, guys, like, semantics, you know, like, move on. The intent is felt through the other words that we're using in the sentence. No, like the egos just like clashed, and then the whole thing like fell apart because of that. And so obviously there was other tensions there, but it's wild how we can argue about words and the semantics of things, and yet it is in the details that we can find truth, right? And so but I think, yeah, okay, so preservation has both, you know, and it could kill it by trying to influence it to preserve itself. Maybe it was supposed to be a dying, you know, culture, maybe not. And so if we preserve it and yet keep it intact, will it grow or not, or will it just kind of freeze? I think the intention was a good one, so keep going with that intention and see what happens, rather than fighting on the semantics of the words.
Yeah.
Just like prayer, like I pray to this God, you pray to that God. That's great. Let's pray together.
Yeah.
Because you're praying to that God, and you should be praying to my God. What? Like,
Isn't there
let's
just
pray
one
together.
God,
Like,
right?
let's
So
dancing, you know,
yeah.
let's sing together. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
One of the things that I saw in the Vision Quest, because I asked myself the question of what the purpose of humans could be that absolutely doesn't disrupt all the entities, from the angels to the demons to the animals to the trees to whatever. And through that contemplation, you know, I found like dancing, singing, you know, are the two things that humans do that basically nature comes and celebrates with us. And pretty much most people come and celebrate as soon as you have a drum that's just creating a beat, and you have a song that is singing the melodies. You know, the birds come and chip and add to the story. And even the moose or the bear might give a little cry just at the right time. And if you can get into that, you know, life symphony, and find that harmony, and relax on the judgments, relax on taking things personally, and really open up, life becomes really amazing. It really becomes incredible. And being open to serve the other, whether it's the animal, whether it's the person that comes in and wonders, you're crazy. Yeah, come be crazy with me, you know, like come join me, or not, like up to you. but that invitation should be always there, like from that openness. And this is where I think the elixir of the divine magic starts playing, if you're very open to that.
Yeah. It's so good, man. And you found a way to bring all of this together with the app, and to kind of like help people tap in and, find out who they are, to look at their blueprint, if you will. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the Sphinx Code and just the origin story of that, and testimonials, and what you're trying to do with that, incorporating all of these beautiful modalities together in that?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it came through right around that same time, like that I got hit by lightning. And then I met a fucking who needed help with this eagle that was abused. And so I came and started talking to this eagle. And he ended up loving the tarot. And so we'd have talks about the tarot. And I was always kind of like, yeah, the tarot, whatever. It's mostly psychics that use it in New York with their little psychic bars, telling you the future. Like the future is, if you live in the present, you don't care about the future so much.
Yeah, you were locked out of it.
There's codes, there's codes, there's symbolism, there's all this stuff. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, it seems like from what he was telling me, I was like, it seems like there should be something more than the tarot is. Like, maybe there should be like a birth there. Maybe there's a deeper code behind it. And so one day we kind of went into this meditation, asking the gods or the creators of the tarot to show up and teach us more of the origin story. And immediately we had, it was Thoth, like the Birdman. And he came and he was like, yep, here's the code. Like, it's based on your birthday. And like, here's what it looks like. And he just went to town on us. And it was actually really intense. And then my friend was kind of like, what? Because that kind of blew his mind compared to what he was taught. And so he had a little bit of this is weird. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, the tarot is amazing. Like there's a whole other story, which goes back to some psychic who had told me that I had connections with the tarot and I should pick up my decks. And I was like, go away, gypsy. But actually she was right. And it ended up like being something that I had then studied for about 12 years. And the tarot, the major arcana, the minor arcana, it's like the major mystery and the minor mystery. Like I was like, wow, like that's really something we should go in deeper into. And so the major arcana is actually our amino acids, which are the building blocks of DNA. And then the minor arcana is actually very much like the I Ching or the human design. It shows the manifestation of our genes. And you can actually track that algorithmically with the whole Fibonacci sequence, with the masculine and the feminine of the Fibonacci. Then you can map it all the way back to the I Ching and the different wheels. There's like 2 wheels in the I Ching, one for predicting the future, which is more like the minor arcana, and one that's like so sacred and it's kind of your soul. And so through this whole download, and then a lot of work, because I think getting the download is one thing, but actually then working it.
Come on, brother. Come on.
You gotta work it,
And then
so
share, being able to share it with people.
Sessions later.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this system is actually mint, and like we can really change CEOs to housewives to even kids that can tune into it. Like that's great. And now I need to bring this out. And so there's all that work also. But it's funny how life is, I was in new media, I was in music, then new media, and then all of a sudden, here I am going off of all of that, going into the total spiritual natural. And then now they want me to come back to the media and use it for this. So it's kind of a pleasure, pain pleasure, because it's like funny to have gone away from it and not want to do it, to now being asked by the spirits to use these new technologies to spread the knowledge to the masses. And I think, it's amazing. It's tremendous power in a sense. And that's, I think, my, I'm not going to say my worry, but revealing the code to somebody who could have negative intentions could be very, very manipulative, because it is, your psyche, it's your psychology, it's your personal, traits and behaviors and wounds, and we can be very manipulated. I mean,
Yeah.
advertising is already manipulating us so deeply. If you really have the code of the person, it's so much easier. And the point is to actually liberate you, to start accepting yourself much deeper, accept your parents, and get out of the victimization of your parents did this and that. It's like, well, actually, it was already in your psyche, and you influence your parents to do that to you so that you could live the experience and either stay a victim or come through it. And then you go into your gratitude of thank you, demon, or thank you,
Mom.
abusive dad or mom or
Yeah.
whatever it was, right?
Yeah. Because you go through the phases, and the phases is resentment or blame. Then it's like, hold on. Like, I had it pretty good, or I'm thankful, or whatever, and it is these wild stages of forgiveness and taking responsibility and not being a victim, or recognizing that you move from victim to victor is to learn, not to do that to anybody, or to, fix it through your kids or something like that. But yeah, it's part of the story that we're all going through. And it's whoever created it knows what they're doing, and so
Sure.
why not? The system works if you work it. So, and that's what you're getting from the app too, being able to take people through that and learn who they are. And like, so let's just talk about this, just because I'm curious. So how does it start with the birthday stuff? Because obviously there's so many different, your sun sign or your moon, or where the moon was actually at, or the sun was at, versus where it was going to raise that morning. How do you trace that with the Sphinx Code?
Yeah, so there's two calculations that are going on. One that is much more following the Fibonacci sequence that gives you your main archetypes. So you have you have like a map of the blueprint that gives you 16 archetypes, which are 16 different positions that define the psyche. And it doesn't matter so much, like for that, so much about the details of where the moon and the rising and all these things. It's because the archetypes are they're like big stories. They're like gods, they're big.
Yeah.
They encompass so much. The calculation in a way of the astrology mirroring, where there is the calculation of where your moon was, and the details comes in the minor arcana chart, which then loads up how that archetype is going to go from one way to the other or in the middle. And the 16 different positions give you your psyche. Like, so you have your masculine traits, which are more like embedded in you and less changeable, versus your behaviors, which are like more adapted by patterns and habits. And so you can change those a little bit more. And you have the feminine traits and feminine behaviors. Then you kind of have your environment, which is what you've learned from more family structures, from your social upbringing, whatever class you're in, and there's patterns there that you have to unhook from and learn. And so then there's the ego, which I call like the projected personality, because it's in a way the ego is what you had to develop as a personality to get the love that you're looking for amongst the circumstances that you were born, right? And there's a pattern to that, in a way, of why you needed to be that, to bring you back to your inner essence versus your masculine and your feminine. So there's also your inner essence in the middle there. And then the key, which the Sphinx Code brings you to, is the harmonization key, which is down in the bottom right in your transcendental path. It's kind of like you have your diamond, which is really you, or it's like your boat. And then you have this transcendental path, which there's some wisdom keepers, they're like, look, it's the 0 and the 1, it's the binary. And the path is more like what the divine is asking you to step into to help you to overcome some of the wounds that you have. And that's always a pain in the ass for everybody. Like mine was to go do admin. I was like, what? Admin? Like, that's insane. Like, I hate admin. I'm more into like the floaty and spiritual. But as soon as I started taking care of my admin, that brought me into so much more depth than just the admin. It brought me into, well, what is my morals? What do I believe in? How much taxes do I want to pay? And to whom? And like, what is the government? Is he like, are they worth 20%, or is it 10%? Or should I pay nothing because I don't believe in governments? Like, it made me go through so many different things that I had no idea and I hadn't thought about, which actually then brought my own moral way of living in my walk in this system, in this civilization. And that became really important because if I was attacked by anybody, there is integrity and there is a system that's in place in my accountability, in my laws, in my way of working that actually is thought through and I'm not going to say unbreakable, but at least provides a decent amount of challenge for anyone that wants to try to attack me on my morality or on my practices, which actually are healing practices. But you have to learn how to navigate the laws, right? So that's my personal aspect. And then you have your soul mission. So as soon as you transcend into your ego, you move into a different type of personality to be able to manifest things, and you move into more of your soul purpose, which funny enough for me is to go into, so once I find like my integrity within my place, I move into more of the media aspects to bring out a message out into the world, right?
Yeah.
And to universalize something. And so you look back at my chart and like there's all these wounds that eventually bring me to this kind of like channeling this new system, and it is part of my own code. And so then you move into your higher traits, you move into your higher feminine and masculine traits, and then obviously that brings up new behaviors, and then that brings up a new environment that you want to live in, which of course brings you into a different crowd that you're going to start interacting with, so that we can fulfill our soul mission. So the archetypes are kind of, they're very detailed in terms of the amount of information they reveal about your psyche and your parents and your past life even, and kind of like your early career versus your late career, and same thing with your relationships, where you have your teenage and 20-year-old relationships versus what you actually look for when you're stepping up into your higher conscious awareness. And then the secondary chart is the one that has all the little details, the nicks and crannies of the archetypes that personalize it completely. And that has a little bit more to do with, let's say, the astrological point. And in a sense, the way that it is there is a wheel that's moving through time and space. And when you kind of come in to your birth, whether you calculate your inception or your birth, it doesn't matter, because you can always do the math backwards.
The inception would that be like 9 months before you were born? Man, see,
Yeah.
that's, like that intuitively that came to me, but then like I put it out there and just tried to do research, and nobody's like, no, they're like, no, it's when you take your first breath. And I was like, well, a star is the spark, and the spark of life happens at the inception. So I'm like, it makes sense in my mind, but I couldn't find anything outside of me or that people would even talk about it. It's like, God, dog.
Yeah, the guy Ra from Human Design talked about that, and he actually talks about like it's a degree, because it's a circle, so that's the time is actually split into degrees. And so he talks about 88 degrees is where you have to go back to find when your spark came in, because it's when there's a crystallization of your spirit and the earth crystal, he calls it, that kind of meet, and that mix creates everything. And in a way, if you think of a circle that's just kind of moving, and you kind of come in at this spark right here, you're now on the train, and so whether it moves really slowly and we only do one turn, or there's several turns, and that's maybe cycles of 7, which is like something that we see in a lot of scriptures, 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, and then you do that 3 times, and that's kind of like the different initiations. Whatever. What's important is the formation in that moment kind of creates a certain destiny, because you have a track, but your fates of how you're going to play that, are you going to just ride it chill, or are you going to resist the whole time, or are you going to, go back and forth? And so there's a certain geometry that the Phi code is based on, and it's mathematics. There's magical squares that it talks about, which then define the frequency of these archetypes. And that's where it's really interesting, because the tarot, I think there's a lot of people now drawing kind of like their own interpretations and then being very creative, which is awesome,
Yeah.
making tons of money. But there is a code which is kind of weird, and that's why the original tarot cards are really weird looking, is because, like, the guy who's like doing, like, he's trying to drink his cup like this, but like this form is actually a geometric form that's in the frequency of the math of what that's doing in terms of you're connecting to your subconscious, which is a frequency in your amino acid. And so there you are, like, having to deal with frequency. And so it's all based on frequency. But again, how do you bring the math of a frequency, which is so abstract, without knowing math or music? You're like, I don't know what that frequency is. Well, here's an image. Now you get to see that. Like, you see this frequency, and here's what it all means.
Yeah.
And, okay, I can deal with that. And then you move through these 22 frequencies, and it's kind of like the tarot is called the Fool's Journey, which is the Fool goes through each of the 21 archetypes, and that becomes like an initiation in itself, which we see that in many different traditions. Like Tara has 21 forms, Kali, she's got 21 forms. You find it in the Bible, you find it in the Kabbalah, you find it in all these things. And so the number aspects of these codes within the stories is what me and my wife basically deciphered, and are still deciphering, because it's not like a done process. It's just so much information to already go deep into your personality and help. But yeah, it's going to evolve, and I think it's time now to like actually try to bring it out to the people and get more people who somehow get attracted to come in and plunge into this world and plug, their own brains to get secrets, so that humanity can have a even better tool.
Yeah.
Or,
It's happening for sure, right? And
is.
I mean, what a privilege to be a part of it. Something that I believe is going to be remembered, for eternity, if you will. We'll show up and remember these times, and that we said yes, and we kept saying yes, and kept showing up, and so every little piece of it being celebrated along the way. I mean, I totally believe that.
For sure. For sure.
So if people want to check out the app and want to get involved, where's the best place for them to go?
You just go to the App Store or the Google Store and the Google Play Store and type in Sphinx Code, or they can even go to the site sphinxcode.com, and you can just do the web version if you don't have a super phone. I don't know. People are calling me on Zoom now. That's kind of weird.
All right. So on top of the app, definitely check the app out. But on top of that, services, website, you doing sessions and things like that. What else you have going on?
I am. I do sessions where basically I use the Sphinx Code to get to your personalization, and I look through my clairvoyance at your energetic state, and then kind of use this essential company that I started called Frequence Life, that helps you rebalance your energetic state, which obviously has huge repercussions in your health. That you can go to maneshibar.com, so Manex, because in Basque the X is sh. So manexibar.com, and book sessions there. I get some workshops. I do these wisdom quests as well, which you can go see, where you can come into nature and explore these modern rites of passages that I do. And actually, because I still do vision quests myself, and past June, I had a whole download where I had to go bother one of the students because they had this book, and the spirits kept being like, go get that book from this person. And I go over there, and I'm like, you have a book that I'm supposed to read. And she's like, Rational Man, it's such a piece of shit book. Like, I hate it. Like, it's horrible. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm supposed to read it. And I read it, and I was like, wow, it's really dark. Like, it's this whole very, patriarchal, macho way of seeing, like, how to treat women bad, and tell them to, like, keep them down and never give up your power. And I was like, wow, kids are reading this, like teenagers that are lost. That this is a disaster. it's exactly what was maybe the old ways, like, and the next day in my vision quest, they came and they were like, here, write down mystical man and bring that, because like I've definitely had a mystical life. I wasn't seeking it. It kind of came to me. I was open for it. And then it came through. And I think this is what men need to focus on. It's not so much our success and our recognition and all this. Like, yeah, our creativity is super important, but how do we get to that creativity without entering into the mystical? I mean, we were talking about this, it's like, how do you follow your path so that you let life initiate you into the wonder? And that is the mystical. And so we kind of use some of the Sphinx Code program to identify 16 different conscious personalities of mystics. And you can go to mysticalman.co and find your mystical. And then we're going to look for women who can do the mystical woman so that we can have a grand party
Yeah.
of the mystics.
Heck yeah. Well,
And I love that you use that, like I love the Christian mystic. It's like, it's beautiful, because if you really look at Christianity, it is about the mystical path. And so that's, I think, the word that reunites all of us, from the seekers are mystics.
Yeah.
And the mystical path comes and finds you, and it's a wonder.
Yep. So good. Well, bro, I enjoyed this conversation, man. I really enjoyed getting to meet you and hear your story and dive deep with you. And I know we can keep going more and more. So we'll have to do it again, bro. It was a great initiation to meet you. So yeah.
It's a pleasure to meet you. You definitely feel like we've had some similar parallel paths.
Yeah,
and,
I'm always curious and like asking like more questions. Like, hey, what was it like? Come on, that's how we get the answers, though, right?
It is for sure.
Enjoyed it, brother. Thanks again. We'll have to do it again.
Thank you so much.
All right, shalom.
All right.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the Truth Seeker podcast, head over to truthseeker.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/truthseeker.